What's up, everybody? So look, I know we mainly do Transformers and Star Wars here, actually exclusively, but I'm making a special exception for this because this is a finished curation. Like, this is a display of mine that is done. It's the first one that's done. This is my Marvel Legends collection. I'm obviously missing a few pieces that haven't been released or announced or whatever, but the collection, where it's going to sit and the display space of it is finished. So that does hold some pretty serious weight for me, and I wanted to share it. So I am going to do this video and we'll go through the shelves, talk about the dioramas, the process, etc., and move on with our day. Hopefully you enjoy it. So the collection is made up of 2 Billy bookcases with the extensions on top. That means an additional shelf on top of each Billy bookcase, and both of those cases flank a Mose Joe, which is the black cabinet at the bottom, with 2 Detolfs on top. Starting with the rightmost bookcase on the top, we have the Sinister Six. Sinister Six has had a lot of different inceptions through the years, but these are the characters that have always represented that team to me. And then I have 2 or 3 on flight stands that I've kept from different Mafex releases, probably the Vulture, Hobgoblin, and Dr. Octopus, all on flight stands so that you can see them over the light that is flashing on them. Speaking of the lights, all the lights are the Norfly system that IKEA makes as well. Quite expensive, but very effective. Moving on to the first shelf, which is the extension shelf. This is my Spider-Man shelf and is basically made up of every Spider-Man rendition or character that I have a connection to, and then I have Stan Lee in there for good measure. Only one I'm missing from here, I think, is an Aunt May figure. The graffiti and stuff on these dioramas are all done by me. All the dioramas are done by me, but I always put in little things, so there's plenty of little Easter eggs of people that mean a lot to me, people I've lost, or whatever the case may be. Etchbox Customs, Crashbox Customs, all that stuff is in there. Stan was here is written on the back of the chimney of one of them. And I always try to put stuff in there that kind of documents the time, so I was pretty much listening to Pop Smoke completely during the making of this, so like I tagged his name on there. Smoke will never clear. And I have some regrets regarding this one because it sits up so high, and the diorama starts the first tier, most of the buildings, at pretty high, so you end up not being able to see a lot of it from a standing position at like a average 6-foot height, which is a bummer, but it was pretty effective. So this is the diorama that we did this right as kind of quarantine was starting and really kicked us into high gear for finishing up this collection. The next shelf down is kind of my Avengers shelf. Now we started at the rooftops and now we're kind of moving on to like the kind of downtown area of the city, and didn't know exactly what to do here. Needed to have different levels and tiers, but also needed it to be kind of open to display all the figures. So we kind of came up with this idea of a monument for the Avengers that's based on a real monument in New York City, but we just removed the monument there and placed an A in its place, and then painted the kind of cityscape in the background, which if you were to look at it at any real length, you would start to see all the flaws in it. However, just looking at it generally, you don't really notice it, and you just sort of accept it for what it is and sort of just take in the visuals, and pretty effective. It's actually, it displays better than the diorama is, and this is meant to kind of house my main Avengers team. Moving on to the next one is kind of like, in the back streets of the city. So moving on from the rooftops to downtown to kind of the neighborhoods. And this store here, Chef Palino's, was a pizza place that my wife and I used to eat all the time. It used to be our favorite pizza in Maryland. So that's why that's there. Once again, Woo and Shooting Star, because that's what I was listening to at the time. And where Lady Thor is, if you look behind that, all my kids have tagged that wall, which I often try to do as well. And the dumpster and trash cans and stuff I bought off of Amazon and just dirtied them up and painted them up and added some kind of props and stuff to them. And then the cityscape here, I did the background and then painted the city at black, and then the lights for the to kind of emphasize that it's at night or something, just for a little bit of a different sort of ambiance. And then we move from the kind of back streets into the subway system, and this is where we have the kind of Defenders and the more street level heroes. I painted the subway staircase there, like on that back wall, to make it give hopefully the illusion that it's looking up, but I think it worked. And then Hell's Kitchen there as the stop. And then I did a lot of like frame pictures, Alias Investigations, Murdoch Law, and all this kind of stuff as like an homage to the Netflix shows and such, Trish Talk, etc. And this one was pretty effective. Like it was pretty easy to do. And it's like, it's kind of simple, but it works kind of a thing. This one I'm not entirely happy with, but it was a sewer system that I did because now we're underneath the subway and we're into the sewers, and the back wall there. So one thing I do try to do is make the graffiti different, right? So like this isn't display graffiti. This is people just tagging stuff. It's not like the stuff that's on the rooftops that people want everyone to see. This is just sort of like some kids tagging, but the back wall are kind of friends that I've lost. That big New York Mike one there, I lost him while I was kind of making this diorama, so we put that on there. And the turtles have tagged it as well, and we use like this straw system for the railings. It doesn't really work 100%, but it's cool. It does a decent job overall. Moving on to the villains, we have just a warehouse. We're kind of out of the theme now of the city, in regards to moving through the layers, and this was just like a loading dock of a warehouse. I'm not sure how many kind of real world dioramas I'm going to get to do, so I kind of wanted to do all the settings that I've been meaning to do, and a warehouse or a loading dock was definitely one of them, so I wanted to kind of take time and make sure I got that right. The railings here were just skewer sticks, I think, that I glued together, and they did a decent enough job. And then the texturing there for the upper walls of the building is just the cardboard, like the inner piece of cardboard that 1,000 different people have used that to do it 1,000 different times. But once again, just to kind of, this was a down and dirty. This one didn't take very long, of just for some Marvel villains. Now this next one is a bit of a challenge for a different reason, because it just needed to house so many figures. So this is made after the temple that Thanos made for Death in the original Infinity Gauntlet, and I just wanted to have a bunch of steps to just pretty much just layer figures on here. My Thanos is the Select Thanos. I have a few Select figures. People feel a way about it. I like it. It reminds me very much of the comic. I had the movie Hella. I would prefer to have the comic one, but it's too expensive for what I'm willing to pay for it. But yeah, this was cool because I got to do like all the space textures on the side of the walls, and also paint the kind of statues of Death, and both in human and skeleton form on the side. And I got to really hone in this marbling effect, which is kind of the third time I've tried to do it, and this is probably the best it's ever looked. So as you can see, I still got a little bit of room for expansion there, which is also something that I take into account when I build these things. This is one that's definitely function over form, but I think it's interesting enough to look at that it does a decent enough job of doing both. Now my Spider-Man villains get their own shelf, and they sit underneath of the Detolfs. It's a bit of a larger space in that Mojo. So this is the front steps of the Daily Bugle, and I did the marbling effect on this as well. And you can see Daily is written in like kids' letters that they can play with, like from a magnet set. And once again, I just needed tiers and I needed space in order to kind of set up as many villains and get them to have their own kind of life and livable area to kind of show them off as I could. So I kind of came up with this design. Not the most exciting, definitely similar to the Thanos one and similar to the next, well, not the next one, but one we're going to look at very soon. But it does a really good job of displaying the figures. It's different enough because of the kind of real world placement of it, and I think it's appropriate, and I'll probably end up putting J. Jonah Jameson in this diorama as soon as I piece together a figure for that. And I think the only characters I'm missing from this is Kingpin, which I have pre-ordered, and then I would love for them to make a Calypso and a Tarantula, and then I think I'm done with this shelf. On top of the second set of Billies, I had the Fantastic Four. I'll eventually probably swap them with an Alpha Flight set. I think I'm going to buy the Alpha Flight set as a reward to myself for finishing this. But I also could use a Franklin for my Fantastic Four, and that is the Select thing, which I prefer over the Legends. And then moving into the first shelf, it is the throne room for Black Bolt of the Inhumans, and this is pretty much just to house my cosmic characters. I had learned my lesson here from the Spider-Man one, where I definitely wanted these figures to not have any tiers at the front to have to look over to see them. So this shelf displays far better than the city one for the Spider-Man shelf, and the throne was actually pretty cool to put together too. And I carved all the symbols and stuff into the foam, and all the cosmic effects in the background, and having the Guardians of the Galaxy there, plus the Nova Corps, and just some few odds and ends, Adam Warlock, etc. And this shelf is pretty much done, bar a few Inhumans that I'd be interested in getting. Then my X-Men blue team, basically, which I used as my first basis of doing 1/12 scale dioramas for the Marvel Legends. This wood floor that I did here, unfortunately the shelf sits up too high for most most people to see it, but I did a pretty good job on it, if I do say so myself. The railings and stuff I bought from a store for like a dollhouse set, and then my wife and I built and painted all of the wood, and all that foam for the actually has like wood grain carved in it, but you can't really see it. It doesn't really show up. It's like a lot of things that you do here end up having a lot more work involved that actually shows up, which is kind of a bummer. And also on the side there, I painted a perspective of the staircase continuing up, since the shelf kind of prevented me from doing so. But yeah, I got to buy some dollhouse furniture, which, you know, I'm sure my dad would be proud of. But I, you know, the couch and the grandfather clock and all that kind of stuff. But it was just cool to kind of put these characters inside of the X Mansion. Like, the X-Men are my favorite Marvel characters, so it was very rewarding for me. Moving outside, we have the X Mansion from the outside. This is my least favorite of all of them that I've done. I did this as an homage to my house. Like, this is the front entryway to my house, and I just like replicated it. I probably should have just gone for the more traditional X Mansion look. It would have provided more stairs and a little bit more options, but like, I just thought it would be cool to kind of do the front entryway of my house. And for that, I'm happy with it. But the lawn, I didn't quite map out measurement wise the best way to kind of display these characters, because there's just not a lot of space, and I kind of want more figures in this space, so it's a bit of a bummer. And then we have my Days of Future Past inspired shelf, which is pretty much just for my X-Force team. And this is mainly to house all the X-Force New Mutants type characters. And I wanted like a brown stone, because I hadn't really got a chance to do that. And like I said, I wanted to take as much variety as I could and as much opportunity as I could to do stuff I might not get the opportunity to do again. So I wanted to do a brown stone, but I had to destroy it. To destroy it, what I ended up doing was just building it and not destroying any of it, and then cutting away pieces and let that be the actual rubble. So all the rubble is actually logical and makes sense. And this one actually ends up being a lot of people's favorites, just because like it displays well. And it was actually my wife's idea to use the Sentinel head there that Nick the toy guy made for me to house, or to display Deadpool rather, that he'd be sitting up on top of it. Because originally I had him sitting on the edge of the shelf, kind of breaking the fourth wall was my intention there. But it does look much more interesting with him sitting on top of the Sentinel head. It works far better. Kudos to her. And then I believe my last X-Men inspired shelf is my X-Factor / Excalibur shelf. And this one is pretty much done, barring a few Excalibur characters, but X-Factor is complete. And it's supposed to be the lighthouse. And the lighthouse is a little small, but I needed the space for the figures. So I don't know. It's one of those things where like when I made this and I put this in, I was like, oh, this one is kind of trash. I didn't care for the diorama at all. But after I put the figures in, just the way that they display the figures in this set, it's one of my favorites. So it was a little bit of a learning experience for me, that like not everything that looks bad is going to display poorly, and not everything that looks great is going to display great. The Spider-Man one would kind of be the other version of this, right? Where it's a beautiful diorama, but it doesn't display the figures very well. So ironically, this Genosha one was the last one that I did, and it's also simultaneously my favorite. So the fence there is made up of gutter guard. That's a select Juggernaut, by the way. And then it's just a rubbled, like a building that's been destroyed. It's supposed to be like the admin building is kind of my thought here. And then Magneto's going to be sitting in a throne made of a Sentinel hand, which I saw online somewhere, and I was inspired to do this whole thing based on that. I think the selling point of this is the lightning effect. So I airbrushed this lightning and then veined it out with white paint with a flat brush. And then I did some light sourcing where I kind of sprayed the mid-color blue tones like on the diorama itself, as if the lightning was lighting up the diorama, and it works really well. It's really striking to see it, and like I'm not the one to kind of pump up my own stuff, but like this one turned out really well, and I'm very proud of it. And it is ironic because it was the last one I did, and maybe it was a culmination of all the things I've learned, I suppose. But really sharp looking shelf. Now this next one is for my other X-Villains, and this is inspired by the Jim Lee piece where he had them all in this like cave like setting with the red sky in the background, and that was the inspiration there. And it was purely just to house characters. Like there's no fluff here, there's no sauce here. It's just to kind of fit as much in as possible. And the key to that was that cave that houses the Brood, so that the Brood doesn't take up a whole lot of space. Because if you have that figure, you know how much shelf space it takes up. And I actually popped the tail off of it, so it doesn't even have its tail on. It's just shoved in that cave, but it does the job, which was kind of clever. And this sort of stuff here, like this diorama, is like a good kind of starting place for a lot of beginning people, because like it's just simple, easy stuff to do. Anybody could do it. All this stuff anybody could do. It's all technique. It's not skill, and you can learn it. And then I have this light stand that I didn't mention in the beginning, to be fair, to the left, and it just houses a couple kind of random teams, all these Venom characters and such. And there's like a squirrel girl and a man thing, just like cool characters that don't really have a placement on the whole shelf. And then Alpha Flight, where I'll probably end up putting my Fantastic Four, just sort of sauce. And then in the middle is my Hot Toys collection, you know, obviously based on the movieverse. And I was kind of got into this a bit prematurely because I was kind of really feeling the movies, and now I'm kind of out and over the movies, so I'm not as much into it. But I'm going to finish off the last couple, and it'll still kind of remain my centerpiece. And then that's my collection, man. And it's interesting. It's like this collection that started off really small in like the corner of my basement and ended up on shelves near the ceiling that nobody could see. And now it's like the first thing done, front and center, lit, curated, and I couldn't be happier about it. It's been a very rewarding experience. It's been a huge learning experience. My wife has been a ton of help. There's a ton of people that have contributed to this. Crashbox did some columns, there's a lot of different little bells and whistles in this, and it's a very meaningful collection to me, and it wasn't always that way. And it's gone to show me that display may be at least 50% of what the collection is to you. And in fact, another thing I've learned is while I'm missing figures, and I've pointed out some of them, and there's others that I'm missing as well. Toad comes to mind, Banshee, Siren. While I'm missing those figures, and they are obvious gaps, and they are figures I want to buy, if they never make them, I'm kind of okay with it because I'm okay with the collection and how it looks. And I'm hoping that sort of thing will spill over into some of my other collections as I complete those. So anyway, hope this was at least entertaining or interesting information to look at. I'm not saying it's the best looking Marvel Legends collection out there, but I'm also saying I may not have seen a better looking one. I'm really proud of how this turned out, and it's just so funny when you take into consideration where it started in my collection, especially in hierarchy. So yeah, thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Until next time, take care.